Hey, hello, leaders. This is Paul Grau Jr., and welcome to Run to Your Leadership Challenges. So, today I'm going to talk about how I screwed up early on in my Air Force career. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I screwed up, and I'm going to tell you kind of what I learned from it and how I fixed it. Because a lot of you listening may just find yourself in this situation, and it could be hard to get out of because it'll suck you in and, you're going to learn to regret it if you don't get out of it soon. So, how I screwed up was my very first permanent station in the Air Force was Loring Air Force Base up in Maine. I mean, we were 3 miles from Canada. It was in Limestone, Maine. Look that up, and it's like way up there. If you go to Presque Isle and then you go up to, I don't know, there was another town there, but Limestone was right out the back gate. So the thing is, when I first got to that base, when I first got to Loring, man, I worked on B-52s and KC-135s, the older models, and it was exciting. I went there direct duty to be a machinist, an aircraft machinist. Now, the thing is about direct duty is you don't go to a tech school to learn how to be a machinist or whatever your trade is or whatever your career field is. You just go direct duty and you learn everything OJT, on the job. All right. You get on the job training and you're set up with a trainer and a mentor, and they walk you through and they take you through step by step and teach you. Well, when I first got there, my very first supervisor when I got to the machine shop was, I'm not going to say his name, but let's just say his name was Bob. All right. So, and that's not his real name, but Bob was a buck sergeant. And in the Air Force, they don't even have buck sergeants anymore. I think I was one of the very last buck sergeants in the Air Force because they shortly did away with it after I sewed on staff sergeant. But a buck sergeant was an E4, but you were an NCO status. So an E4 was split between a senior airman for the first year, and then after that first year, you became a buck sergeant. You were an NCO. And it just gave you a little bit more responsibility, but I don't know. I don't know why they did away with it. So my very first supervisor slash trainer was this E4 buck sergeant. We'll say buck sergeant Bob. And, I thought he was going to teach me and mentor me and, both on and off the job. Shortly after I got there, man, I really enjoyed hanging around with Bob. He was a really nice guy, and he invited me over to his house to meet his wife and his kids. And he was only a few years older than me, but I mean, he was married and had kids. I wasn't. And, he had me over for dinner a few times. Well, and then he took me hunting, and, it was almost like we were getting to be buddies. And I didn't think anything was wrong with that. And under the circumstance, Loring Air Force Base is out in the boondocks. And if you don't know what boondocks is, man, it's out in the wilderness, okay? Northern Maine wilderness. There is nothing around there for miles and miles. So we used to go to Canada up, I forget the name of the town in Canada, but we used to go across to Canada about an hour's drive to get to the first real town that had clubs and stuff. And that was the nightlife. But Buck Sergeant Bob, come to find out, man, he just did not set me up for success. Unlike what I thought and what I expected, he was just not a good machinist. And I didn't know any better. So I was like following everything that he told me to do. And unfortunately, I was doing it wrong. I was doing it the wrong way. I was just kind of, for lack of better words, half-assing it. All right. And that was Buck Sergeant Bob's theory, get it done, get it quick. It's good enough for government work was his attitude. And, it was really bad. So it was getting even worse because off duty, he just wasn't a good husband and father either. And, I just caught myself saying, you know what, I got to make a change here. I have got to get away from Buck Sergeant Bob. And there was a couple other guys in the shop that were amazing machinists. And I think they were either buck sergeants or staff sergeants, but what a difference. And their names were Mark and Dave. And Mark and Dave were amazing, man. They were master machinists. They were young NCOs, but they knew the aircraft, they knew the machines, they knew how to do just about everything and anything. And Mark actually went on to become a tech school instructor later on in his career. But the thing is, I was smart enough to see that Buck Sergeant Bob was taking me down a wrong road. And that was leading to some bad decisions, and it was not going to get any better for me. And I had to take things into my control and be proactive. And I approached my shop chief at the time and I didn't throw Buck Sergeant Bob under the bus. I just kind of said, hey, I would really like to go on a different shift. And I would really like to have either Mark or Dave as my trainers. And I told them because they seemed to really know a lot. Buck Sergeant Bob used to ask them questions all the time. And I said, hey, rather than getting it secondhand or third hand, I want to go right to them and I want to learn from them because they're the best. And the shop chief agreed with me. He's like, yeah, man, they're great. I'm going to put you on a shift with them. And I was able to turn my career around at that point. But man, if I would have stayed on that same path with Buck Sergeant Bob, I don't know what would have happened. But I did learn some valuable lessons. And probably the biggest, most valuable lesson is you need to be cautious of who you follow and who you trust for that matter. And that means, just because somebody's in a position of authority is not always going to mean that they're doing things the right way. So I also learned right there that if you want good things to happen in your life and in your career, you need to watch out for yourself. You need to watch out for number one, because the bottom line is most people out there, and I'm talking about most leaders out there, they do not have you on the top of their radar. They don't have your best interest in mind. They probably think a lot about themselves. They probably treat you right. They probably set you up for success. But guess what? At the end of the day, they're going home and they just don't have your best interest in mind all the time. Now, good leaders do. Good leaders will bend over backwards for you. And they're going to jump through hoops to make sure that you're set up for success. And they do have your best interest in mind. But I learned early that you just can't always take things for granted. So, and probably another thing that I learned that was probably one of the most important lessons that I took away from that is the value of training and the value of getting trained by the right person and right people. And when you hire a trainer for your shop, or if you're training your people, make sure that you're training them right, because they don't know any different. If you are not 100% confident and sure about something, don't teach them on it. Bring somebody else in and help them learn it the right way. Because if you just teach them half-ass like Buck Sergeant Bob was teaching me, and that's the product you're going to get. So be very cautious of who you listen to, especially when you're learning how to do things on the job and in life for that matter. If you want to learn how to skydive, I would not recommend you contacting the cheapest place, right? There's probably a reason why they're the cheapest place. I would probably more look for one of the more expensive skydiving outfits, because I want to make sure I trust that person when we jump out of that plane. It's the same with anything else. If you're going to spend money, go the extra mile and hire somebody to do the job right. And if you're a trainer or if you're teaching and mentoring other people, if you don't know for sure, sit down and figure it out with them. That's better than just telling them something that's not 100% true. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this show. And if it resonated with you, please share it with somebody else that you might think will enjoy it. And tomorrow, I think tomorrow and Saturday, we're going to talk about the waiting room. And what do you do when you're in the waiting room of life? What do you do when you're in a waiting room of leadership? And that's two topics there. And it's from a book that I recently read from Jeff Henderson. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Friday and Saturday's episode is going to be what you're doing in the waiting room, what we're waiting for next. I hope to see you tomorrow. And until then, run to your challenges. We'll see you.